Imagine the ultimate reality of the universe,
Right.
like the architect of black holes, quantum mechanics, time itself. The infinite mind that basically sustains the existence of every galaxy and every microscopic cell.
Yeah.
Now imagine that exact same architect having to learn how to walk.
It's wild to even picture.
Right. Imagine that infinite mind feeling the sting of a scraped knee or experiencing genuine exhaustion and needing to have his diaper changed.
Yeah, that is the scandalous, breathtaking claim we are unpacking today.
Because we aren't talking about like some deity throwing lightning bolts from a pristine mountaintop.
Yeah.
We're talking about the claim that the creator of the cosmos willingly became a fragile, bleeding human being.
And it completely shatters the ancient and frankly modern expectation of what the divine is, supposed to be.
Absolutely.
If you look at Greek philosophy or Eastern mysticism, the ultimate goal is almost always to escape the messy physical world.
Yeah.
Right? To reach some pure, untouchable spiritual plane.
Right, like shedding the body.
Exactly. But the doctrine we're examining today reverses that entirely. The claim is that the divine deliberately plunged headfirst into the dirt and the blood of human history.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're focusing on you, the listener, and guiding you through what is arguably the absolute hinge of the entire Christian faith, the Incarnation.
The big one.
Yeah. And our primary roadmap for this is this dense, incredibly detailed theological manuscript sitting here on the desk. It's titled The Incarnation, God Becomes Flesh by Chris R. Velazquez.
And it's accompanied by these really intricate infographics, too.
Yes. The infographics are amazing. They map out this whole concept from literally before the dawn of time all the way to the end of history.
Which is helpful because the core argument here is that this isn't just like a piece of religious trivia. The author calls this the doorway through which the whole gospel passes.
Wow, the doorway.
Meaning, if you get this wrong, the entire architecture of the worldview collapses.
Yeah.
We're exploring a historical and theological earthquake here. The premise is that God didn't just send a prophet with a list of demands. He didn't, text us a manual for better living.
Or project some divine hologram into the first century.
Right. Exactly. He stepped into the timeline, permanently wrapping himself in human nerve endings. So our mission today is to examine the mechanics of how this is even philosophically possible and the profound why behind it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand the sheer scale of the Incarnation, you have to realize the story doesn't start with a manger in Bethlehem.
No, not at all.
It doesn't start with shepherds or Roman emperors. The very first node on the timeline we're looking at here in the infographics is labeled eternity.
Yeah, that's where it begins.
The claim is that the entity who became Jesus of Nazareth actually existed before time and space were even a concept.
We're talking about the preexistence of the Son, the second person of the Trinity, and the manuscript grounds this in John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
Right, the word.
Yeah, and in the original Greek, that term is logos.
Logo.
Right. To the ancient mind, the logos was the abstract, rational principle that held the chaotic universe together.
Like the fundamental equation of reality.
Exactly. It was the ultimate, untouchable cosmic logic. But the text pairs this with Colossians 1, which states that this logos is the active agent of creation. Everything visible and invisible was, authored by him.
So the one who becomes flesh is the one who invented flesh.
Precisely.
Like, he designed the carbon atom. He designed the human nervous system.
And that profound theological irony is what guards this concept against its most common reduction.
What do you mean by reduction?
Well, throughout history, people have desperately wanted to turn Jesus into an enlightened human.
Oh, right.
Like a guru who meditated his way to a higher consciousness, or a moral philosopher who just really understood the human condition.
Let me stop you right there, because that enlightened human trope is so deeply ingrained in our modern culture,
It really is.
We love a good self-actualization story. We want a guy who figured out the secret to the universe so he can teach us the 10 steps to do it ourselves.
Yeah, buy his book, take his masterclass.
Exactly. But if he is the eternal creator, this isn't a story of a human achieving divinity.
It's exactly the opposite. It's a change in how the divine is present within the material world. It's a descent, not an ascent.
I was thinking about this while tracing the timeline in the sources. It's almost like an author writing a novel.
Okay, I like where this is going.
But instead of just writing the book or throwing in a quick invincible cameo like a narrator who can't be touched by the plot, The author writes themselves into the story as a fragile character,
Right.
like Shakespeare writing himself into Hamlet, but deliberately binding himself to the rules of Denmark. If a sword swings, Shakespeare bleeds. He is subject to the gravitational pull of the world he just spoke into existence.
That framing is essential, actually, because it sets the stakes for what happens next on the timeline, which is the fall.
Right, Genesis 3.
Yeah. The sources indicate that humanity was originally designed for communion and stewardship. Eden wasn't just a pleasant garden. It was intended to be an overlapping space where heaven and earth intersected seamlessly.
But then we hit that rupture. And looking closely at the text Velazquez provides, this rupture isn't just, a slap on the wrist for eating a forbidden piece of fruit.
No, it's catastrophic.
The manuscript describes it in incredibly visceral terms. It brings shame, death, total alienation. The phrase that jumped out at me was that the distance between God and humanity became moral and spiritual, not just spatial.
And that moral distance is the entire crux of the human problem, according to this theology. When humanity rebelled, they didn't just break a rule, they introduced a localized ontological rot into the fabric of creation.
Wow, ontological rot.
Yeah, they created a moral void. And if the problem is a moral and spiritual chasm, how do you bridge it? You can't bridge it with better education.
Because giving a drowning person a manual on how to swim doesn't save them.
Exactly.
You can't just mandate that people be better.
Precisely. The text argues that humanity didn't need a cosmic self-help book. They needed a rescue from within the human condition itself. They needed forgiveness, which requires justice, and they needed an entirely new life.
Right.
The fall basically created the absolute inescapable necessity for the incarnation.
So humanity breaks the world. The moral chasm opens up. Now, if I'm the ultimate creator, I'm looking at this botched experiment and I'm hitting the reset button.
Sure, wipe it out.
Yeah, I'm wiping the slate clean and starting over with a totally new universe.
Right.
But looking at the grand narrative mapped out in our sources, God specifically chooses not to do that.
Right.
Instead, we enter this agonizingly slow, multi-millennial process of preparing the world for a rescue mission.
It's a really long wait. The timeline moves from the fall into this complex historical era defined by covenants, redemption, kingdom, and eventually exile.
Yeah.
And to a modern reader who's totally accustomed to instant gratification, this feels like an absurdly inefficient way to save the world.
Which is exactly my question. Why not just send the Messiah in Genesis chapter 4? Like, why the massive wait?
Well, the theology suggests that humanity had to be thoroughly convinced of their own inability to save themselves.
Oh, I see.
Think about the covenants. God makes these binding relational agreements with Abraham, Moses, David, and a covenant in the ancient Near East wasn't just a handshake,
Right, it was a blood oath.
Exactly. God makes these promises, and the pattern that emerges is just staggering in its repetition. God is faithful, humanity fails. God is faithful, humanity fails.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. I was looking at the section on the Davidic kingship. Israel demands a human king, they get a lineage of kings, and it just completely collapses.
Over and over.
Yeah. And by the time we hit the exile phase, where Israel has their temple burned to the ground, their throne destroyed, they're dragged off into Babylon, it feels like a devastating socio-political failure. But the text argues it was actually a necessary theological lesson.
It really was. The exile exposed the absolute depths of human lostness. It proved that no merely human ruler, no matter how politically savvy or militarily powerful, could fix the internal human problem.
Right, the rot was too deep.
Yeah. The law couldn't fix it because people couldn't keep it. The kings couldn't fix it because they were corrupt. The temple system was like a temporary patch, but it didn't change the human heart.
So it was a systemic exhaustion of every possible human solution.
Yes.
Every political system, every earthly king, every attempt at self-salvation had to be tried and found fundamentally lacking. Which brings us to the Apostle Paul's phrase in Galatians 4:4, which the manuscript highlights, the fullness of time.
That phrase is so key. When the Messiah finally arrives, it's in a world that has been psychologically and spiritually prepped for a Redeemer who is one of us, but categorically more than us.
Yeah.
The prophets had been crying out not just for a better king, but for a new heart.
And practically speaking, the first century was the perfect cultural incubator for this.
Sure.
Well, you had the Pax Romana Roman peace, and Roman roads, meaning a message could travel faster than ever before. You had a universal language in Greek, and you had a Jewish diaspora, meaning there were people expecting this Messiah scattered all over the known world.
The setup was flawless.
Right. The wait was long, But as the text says, it was charged with anticipation.
Yet, despite all that grand anticipation, the actual arrival subverts every single expectation they had.
Completely. They're waiting for a warrior king to ride down from the clouds, slaughter the Roman legions with a sword of fire, and, establish global dominance.
That was the hope.
And what do they get? A baby born to a peasant woman in a feeding trough in the backwaters of the empire.
And the contrast is deliberate. It's scandalous. The text points out that the baby in the manger is the Davidic king entering history, but doing so in ultimate vulnerability. There's no imperial spectacle. There's no wealth.
Which forces us to look at the actual mechanics of what is happening in that manger. How does an infinite God compress into a finite human body?
It's a huge question.
The sources dive into incredible theological precision here, starting with John 1:14. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us.
The linguistic choice in the original Greek there is fascinating. The word used for dwelt is skinu, which literally means to pitch a tent or tabernacle.
Okay, so he didn't just casually visit.
No.
To a Jewish reader, the word tabernacle is loaded with massive historical weight.
Immense weight. In the Old Testament, the tabernacle was the physical, localized tent where the terrifying, unapproachable presence of God resided during the wilderness wanderings.
Right, with the pillar of cloud and fire.
Exactly. It was the epicenter of divine glory. So John is making a radical claim here. He's saying that ancient tent of meeting has been replaced. The eternal creator has now pitched his tent in a human nervous system. Jesus is the new locus of the divine presence.
He didn't build a new stone temple in Jerusalem. His physical body is the temple. But this is exactly where things get incredibly complicated.
Yeah.
And where the sources draw a massive, non-negotiable line in the sand regarding early church orthodoxy. We have to talk about the Council of Chalcedon and the doctrine of the two natures.
The central doctrine here is the hypostatic union. One person, two natures, fully God and fully man.
Okay, wait. If I'm a listener trying to visualize this, the math sounds impossible. How can you be 100% of one thing and 100% of another?
It breaks our categories.
When people hear fully God and fully man, it is so incredibly easy to picture a demigod, like Hercules.
Right.
Like his 50% divine power, 50% human limitation. A hybrid.
And Velasquez anticipates this exact modern confusion, which is why he leans so heavily on the specific boundaries established by the early church. The Chalcedonian definition states that these two natures exist without confusion, without division, without mixture, and without separation.
Let's break that down, because without mixture is a massive concept.
It is.
Like, if I mix blue and yellow paint, I get green. I lose the original colors to create a third thing. The text is saying Jesus is not green paint.
Correct. He is not a third new category being that is halfway between God and man. He retains the absolute, undiminished fullness of the divine nature while assuming the absolute complete fullness of a human nature.
And there's another popular misconception here that the text touches on. I call it the spacesuit analogy.
Oh, I've heard this one.
People often picture a glowing, divine, omniscient mind stuffed inside a human meat suit. Like God is just wearing a human body the way an astronaut wears a spacesuit to survive a hostile environment. He looks human on the outside, but inside, he's just pure unfeeling deity operating the controls.
The spacesuit analogy perfectly illustrates the exact heresy the early church was trying to avoid. Yeah, think about it. A spacesuit protects you from the environment. It insulates you. If Jesus is just wearing a flesh suit, the divine mind inside doesn't actually feel the vacuum of space. He doesn't actually experience the terror of death. But the source explicitly states he assumed a complete human nature.
Meaning what exactly, beyond just having skin and bones?
Meaning he took on a human body, a human soul, a human mind, a human will, and human emotions.
That is staggering.
It really is.
He had to learn how to walk. He didn't emerge from the womb speaking fluent Aramaic. His human brain had to develop language. He felt genuine cognitive fatigue. When his friend Lazarus died, he didn't just simulate crying. He experienced the physiological and emotional devastation of grief.
And this brings us to the crucial why. Why does this strict, highly technical, mechanical definition matter? To a lot of people, debating the precise mechanics of two natures sounds like philosophical decoration, like theologians just arguing over how many angels can dance on the head of a pin.
But the source argues that this isn't decoration. It is the load-bearing pillar of the gospel.
Yes. If you get the mechanics wrong, the entire mechanism of salvation breaks down. The logic here regarding the atonement, the reconciliation of God and humanity, is stark. If Christ is not fully God, He cannot bear the infinite weight of moral debt we discussed earlier.
Right, if I'm trying to pay off a billion-dollar national debt, handing the bank a $20 bill doesn't accomplish anything.
Exact.
A mere human, even a perfectly sinless one, is still finite. A finite being cannot offer a sacrifice of infinite worth to satisfy the justice of an infinite creator. So if he's just a regular, really good guy dying on a cross, it's a tragic Roman execution, not a cosmic redemption.
But conversely, if he isn't fully human, he cannot legally or mortally represent us. He cannot act as the second Adam. The early church father, Gregory of Nazianzus, famously summarized this: "That which is not assumed is not healed."
I love that quote. It makes so much sense.
It's brilliant.
If he didn't take on a human mind, human minds remain broken. If he didn't take on human anxiety isn't redeemed. He had to absorb the entirety of the human experience into himself to heal it from the inside out.
Hebrews chapter 2, which our source references heavily, explicitly states he had to be made like his brothers in every respect. He had to be entirely God to have the power to accomplish the saving, and entirely human to have the right to represent the saved.
Wow.
The Incarnation isn't just a fascinating prologue to the crucifixion. It is the absolute mechanical prerequisite for the atonement.
So if this mind-bending union actually occurred in history, if the infinite creator literally wired himself into a human nervous system, it radically upends everything we think we know about who God is and what a human being is.
It's just the focus of the manuscript's next major theme, reframing the divine and the human.
Right.
The text makes this bold assertion that the Incarnation is the ultimate definitive revelation of God character. It quotes Jesus in John 14:9, "Whoever has seen me has seen the Father."
Think about the implications of that for you listening right now. If you want to know what the invisible, incomprehensible God is actually like, you don't look at a terrifying thunderstorm.
No.
You don't read abstract philosophy about the unmoved mover. You look at a first-century Jewish carpenter.
And it radically redefines the concept of holiness. In almost every religious framework, holiness requires separation. It functions like a sterile operating room. If you want to stay pure, you have to isolate yourself from the dirt and the disease of the outside world.
But the author argues that God's holiness is so potent, it isn't compromised by proximity to sin. Instead of catching our disease, his health is contagious.
That is the perfect way to articulate it. He enters the real, filthy, broken world of leprosy, systemic corruption, and death. He touches the leper. He eats with the traitors. And instead of being contaminated by their impurity, his nearness cleanses them.
It's incredible.
His holiness is displayed precisely in his merciful descent into the mess.
The source establishes a firm, non-negotiable rule based on this. Any picture of God that contradicts the character of Jesus must be rejected.
He is the interpretive lens for all of reality.
So if I'm a listener, and my internal version of God is like a distant tyrant or a hyper-angry celestial cop just waiting to catch me slipping up, but Jesus is weeping over Jerusalem and washing the filthy feet of his followers. My internal picture of God is fundamentally flawed, according to this theology.
It is. It doesn't just reframe God, though. It profoundly, permanently reframes how we view human nature. And this might be the most shocking claim in the entire manuscript.
I know exactly what you're about to say, and it staggered me when I read it. I think there's a massive assumption out there that after the resurrection, Jesus sort of shed the human body.
Oh, absolutely.
Like taking off a heavy winter coat when you finally get back inside a warm house. He did the grueling human thing for 33 years, got crucified, rose again, and then ascended back to being a purely spiritual, formless entity floating in the ether.
The text is emphatic. The Son's humanity is not a temporary costume. It is a permanent ontological reality. When he assumed human nature, he didn't do it just for a 3-decade field trip. He sanctified it forever.
The manuscript literally says, humanity is now enthroned in him at the right hand of the Father. Listeners, pause and really process that claim. The assertion is that right now, in whatever dimension or reality heaven occupies, there is a human being with a beating heart, lungs, and physical scars sitting on the throne of the universe.
The theological consequence of that permanent humanity is staggering. It means the physical material world is not something to be escaped. Greek Gnosticism taught that the flesh was evil and the spirit was good, and the goal of life was to shed the evil meat prism.
But this theology says the physical body matters immensely. History matters. The mundane details of daily physical existence matter.
Very much so.
Christianity is not an evacuation plan to abandon Earth and become ethereal ghosts plucking harps on clouds. It is the restoration, elevation, and eventual resurrection of physical humanity.
God made the physical world, called it good, and then permanently welded himself to it. And the author draws a brilliant, somber connection between the beginning and the end of Christ's earthly life to illustrate this. He notes that the manger and the cross are intimately connected.
Yeah, the same one who was wrapped in swaddling cloths as a vulnerable infant is eventually wrapped in burial cloths as a casualty of the world. He came to save. He didn't come merely to admire humanity, he came to redeem it.
But there is a trap here.
What's that?
If we get so wrapped up in the beauty and the theological mechanics of how God became man, we risk turning the Incarnation into an abstract thought experiment.
Oh, right.
And the author explicitly outlines 5 specific ways people throughout history, and especially today, misunderstand and distort this reality, completely derailing the gospel in the process.
Yeah, so what does this all mean for us? The text provides a literal common misunderstandings or dangers section. And the first one is exactly what we warned against at the very beginning, making Jesus less than God.
Historically, this took the form of a heresy called Arianism. Arius argued that Jesus was the highest, most glorious created being, like a super angel, but not eternally God. Today, it takes the form of viewing him merely as a brilliant moral philosopher.
But if you reduce him to a creature, no matter how glorious, the entire architecture falls apart.
It does.
If he is just a really good man who gets crushed by the Roman Empire for standing up for the poor, the cross isn't a cosmic salvation event. It's just a tragic story of a good guy losing. And worse, if God just sends a proxy creature to suffer and die while he stays safely in heaven, that's not self-sacrificial love. That's cosmic child abuse.
Precisely. The divine glory of the event relies entirely on the fact that God himself is the one on the cross. The second danger the manuscript lists is the inverse, making Jesus less than man.
We touched on this with the spacesuit analogy, but the early church called this docetism.
Yes, from the Greek word dokon, meaning to seem. It's the idea that Jesus only seemed or appeared to be human. It stems from that same Gnostic fear that the divine is far too pure to actually get its hands dirty with real flesh and blood, so God just projected a physical illusion.
When I was looking at the infographics detailing this heresy, I couldn't help but think of the reality show Undercover Boss.
Undercover Boss, how so?
Oh, you know the premise. The billionaire CEO of a massive corporation puts on a fake mustache, dons a hairnet, and works the deep fryer at one of his fast food chains for a week to see what the ground-level workers deal with.
Okay, yeah.
It makes for great television. But here's the catch. No matter how hot the kitchen gets or how mean the shift manager is, the CEO always knows he's going back to his mansion on Friday.
He has a safety net.
Exactly. He knows his bank account is full. He's insulated. It's not his actual reality. It's a temporary role play.
That is a brilliant modern translation of the docetic heresy.
Yeah.
If Jesus is just playing undercover boss, then he isn't actually experiencing the human condition.
Exactly. The text is aggressively saying Jesus was not playing undercover boss. He actually became the worker. He subjected himself to the grease, the exhaustion, and the poverty without a safety net.
Yes.
If he is just wearing a human mask, it destroys the reality of his obedience and his suffering. If he didn't actually feel the tearing of tissue and the terror of suffocation on the cross, then his sympathy for our pain is entirely fake.
Which connects directly to the third danger the text identifies, separating the Incarnation from the cross. It is deeply tempting, especially around the Christmas season, to view the Incarnation as just a sentimental divine visit. Look how much God loves us. He came to hang out in a manger.
We love the baby in the manger because babies are safe. They don't demand anything from us.
But the sources are unflinching here. The Incarnation is fundamentally a redemptive invasion. He did not come merely to inspire us with his presence. He took on a body specifically so that he would have a body to offer as a sacrifice. You cannot sever Bethlehem from Calvary.
The cradle exists for the cross. It's not a holiday vacation. It's a military extraction mission that requires the commander to become a casualty.
Well said. The fourth danger shifts into how we use language today, turning the Incarnation into vague spirituality.
Oh, this one feels aggressively modern. We hear the word incarnational thrown around constantly in modern cultural spaces and even in corporate leadership seminars.
The text notes that people use incarnational today as a buzzword to simply mean being nice, relational, or authentic with people.
Like, I'm practicing incarnational living by having a really vulnerable cup of coffee with my friend right now.
Right. And while being present with people is certainly a good thing, the text insists that the Incarnation is an actual, unrepeatable historical event.
A literal event in history.
Yes, it is the eternal Son assuming human human tissue in the first century, not just a fuzzy, generalized feeling of human interconnectedness. To reduce it to vague spirituality completely strips it of its historical, objective anchor.
Which brings us to the fifth misunderstanding, and this one pivots the entire conversation from doctrine to action, forgetting the ethical demand. The manuscript insists that the Incarnation isn't just a theological puzzle to be admired on a whiteboard. It is a definitive pattern of life to be duplicated.
The author transitions here into a robust section on practical theology. How does the reality that God became flesh actually alter the minute-by-minute existence of the listener? He breaks this down into worship, suffering, holiness, ministry, humility, and mission.
Let's look at worship first. The text says this doctrine transforms worship from a posture of blind distance to a posture of intimate nearness. We aren't screaming our prayers into a cold, empty void hoping an abstract force acknowledges us. We are speaking to a God who has made himself known in physical form.
But where this becomes intensely personal for the listener is in the category of suffering.
Oh, yeah.
The text relies heavily on Hebrews 4.15, which states that we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses. Because the Son became flesh, he knows human frailty from the inside out.
The text makes a very careful distinction here, though. It says, this does not mean he sinned. It means he fully entered our condition. He experienced the full spectrum of unfallen human limitation. He knew hunger, severe dehydration, the betrayal of close friends, systemic injustice, and physical agony.
The philosophical implications for the problem of pain are profound here. The problem of pain often asks, how can a good God allow suffering? While the Incarnation doesn't necessarily hand us a tidy intellectual spreadsheet explaining exactly why a specific tragedy occurred in the moment, it fundamentally changes the nature of the suffering.
How so?
It guarantees that humans do not suffer before a detached, apathetic God.
Wow.
When you are sitting in a hospital room waiting for a biopsy result, or when you are crushed by grief, you are not praying to a deity who has to consult a Wikipedia page to understand human anxiety.
Right.
You suffer before one who has felt the adrenaline spike of terror in his own bloodstream. God hasn't abandoned you to the darkness. He plunged himself into it first.
That is an incredibly grounding thought. And the author moves from that internal reality to the external reality of holiness. Because the Incarnation happened, the material world is validated.
The Christian life is not escape from the body, but consecration of the whole person. That is a direct quote from the manuscript, and it challenges centuries of bad religious programming.
We've been conditioned to think that to be truly holy, you have to withdraw from society, become a monk, take a vow of silence, and meditate on a mountain, far away from the dirty realities of commerce and biology.
Right, right.
But Jesus spent decades as a manual laborer. He worked with wood and stone. He sweated.
Which means your physical labor has immense spiritual dignity. The spreadsheet you build, the diaper you change, the meal you cook, these are not distractions from the spiritual life. They are the very arena of holiness. It dignifies ordinary, unglamorous life.
But I want to push back on this next point the author makes because it feels like it's going to make a lot of modern listeners very uncomfortable.
Okay, let's hear it.
The text has a section titled, For Humility and Leadership, and it unequivocally states, the Incarnation destroys status seeking.
Yes.
Let's be honest. We live in a society and a corporate culture that violently demands the opposite. Every algorithm, every career seminar screams at you to hustle. Build your brand, accumulate followers, seek status, assert dominance, never show weakness. How on earth does the Incarnation challenge a culture completely built on upward mobility?
It doesn't just challenge it, it inverts it entirely. It is fundamentally countercultural. The author points back to the ancient hymn recorded in Philippians 2. The eternal Son, who possessed ultimate, unquestioned status, glory, and omnipotence, did not consider equality with God something to be exploited for his own advantage. Instead, he chose the path of radical downward mobility.
He emptied himself.
Yes, kenosis in the Greek. He willingly divested himself of the privileges of deity to become a servant. Therefore, the author argues, it is entirely illogical and hypocritical for anyone claiming to follow this incarnate Lord to ruthlessly cling to prestige, image, or corporate dominance.
The manuscript uses a phenomenal phrase. True greatness is cruciform, meaning shaped like a cross.
Descent before exaltation, service before honor. The manger and the cross are not merely religious symbols to wear on a necklace, they are the literal blueprint for human greatness.
Wow.
If you are in a position of leadership, whether in a church, a boardroom, or a family, it must be marked by sacrificial service. You cannot claim allegiance to the God who washed dirty feet while simultaneously using the people around you as disposable stepping stones for your own ego.
That is a brutal, unyielding mirror to hold up to modern leadership structures. The hustle culture tells you to leverage people. The Incarnation tells you to bleed for them,
It's a completely different paradigm.
which transitions perfectly into the final practical implication mission. The manuscript states, God came near to us in Christ, therefore we go near to others and witness.
It frames the concept of mission not as a corporate strategy, a marketing campaign, or a sales technique, but as a literal participation in the downward movement of divine love.
God condescended, meaning he willingly stepped down from his position of comfort to meet us in our mess. He didn't shout instructions from the clean operating room. He walked into the plague ward. So if we're going to interact with the world around us, we can't do it from a position of insulated superiority. We have to go near to people, regardless of how messy, inconvenient, or agonizing their reality is.
Synthesizing this massive historical and theological narrative we've explored today, the conclusion Velasquez draws is incredibly profound. The Church, and indeed the entire framework of Christian hope, exists solely because God refused to stay distant.
He didn't drop a pamphlet from the sky. He became the message.
And the ultimate end of the timeline mapped out in our infographics, the new creation, will be the final cosmic homecoming of everything the Incarnation initiated. A restored physical universe where heaven and earth overlap completely once again, and God dwells with humanity permanently.
It is an absolutely breathtaking vision of reality, one that reorients history, philosophy, and our daily lives.
It really does.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to chew on as you go about the rest of your day. We spent a lot of time discussing the staggering claim that Jesus permanently united himself with human nature. He didn't discard his human body. He dignified our physical existence forever, taking human tissue to the very throne of the universe.
Right.
If you truly internalize that claim, if the infinite creator of the cosmos looked at human flesh with all its sweat, its wrinkles, its limitations, and its frailty, and decided it was worthy of his permanent residence, how does that change the way you look at the face of the very next person you interact with today?
That's a powerful question.
Whether it's the barista handing you coffee, the coworker who constantly gets on your nerves, or your spouse sitting across the table. If human nature has been elevated to the right hand of God, are there any truly ordinary people left? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep exploring the concepts that shape our reality, and we'll catch you next time.